He is among the Aratar, the greatest of the Valar, a huntsman who would slay the beasts of Morgoth. He would also be the Vala to discover the newly awakened elves. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover Orome, the huntsman of the Valar. Orome loved the lands of Middle-earth, and after the destruction of the two lamps, he left unwillingly and was the last of the Valar to retreat to Valinor. Tolkien describes Orome as a mighty lord, and while he may be less strong than Tulkas, he is more dreadful in anger. While Tulkas was strong, he was rarely angry, but Orome was known for his terrible wrath. Among the Valar, Nessa the dancer is his sister, and his wife is Vána, the ever-young. Vána, like her sister Yavanna, has influence over the flora and fauna of Middle-earth. Orome is said to love all trees, which earns him the name Tauron from the Sindar, meaning Lord of Forests. Orome would spend time in the forests that Yavanna had brought forth in Valinor, where it is said he would train his folk and his beasts for the pursuit of the evil creatures of Melkor. During this time, when Middle-earth is left in darkness, Orome would often pass back east over the mountains, returning with his host to the hills and plains of Middle-earth. There he would take delight in hunting the monsters of Melkor. And Orome, Tamer of Beasts, would ride too at whiles in the darkness of the unlit forests. As a mighty hunter, he came with spear and bow, pursuing to the death the monsters and fell creatures of the kingdom of Melkor. And his white horse, Nahar, shone like silver in the shadows. Then the sleeping earth trembled at the beat of his golden hooves. And in the twilight of the world, Orome would sound the Valaroma, his great horn, upon the plains of Arda, whereat the mountains echoed and the shadows of evil fled away. And Melkor himself quailed in Utumno, foreboding the wrath to come. But even as Orome passed, the servants of Melkor would gather again, and the lands were filled with shadows and deceit. One day, in the year of the trees 1085, while riding near the Orokarni, Orome and his steed Nahar hear the singing of many voices. Thus they discover the newly awakened elves. Orome returns to Valinor, where a council is convened, and in the year 1101, the Valar decide to invite the elves to live with them in Aman. Orome returns to Cuiviénen, but the elves are unwilling to come back with Orome to Aman. It turns out they do not trust him, in part because of Melkor. We are told Melkor greatly hates and fears the riding of Orome, so he would send his dark servants as riders and send lying whispers to the elves so that they would shun Orome if they should ever meet. Having also seen the Valar battle Melkor in the Battle of the Powers, the elves are also fearful of the Valar in general. Instead, Orome takes 3 elf chieftains to Valinor. Finally, in the year of the trees 1105, at the behest of their returning chieftains, most of the elves begin their great march west, led by Orome upon Nahar. Orome is the first to refer to the elves as the Eldar, meaning people of the stars, for they loved the creations of Varda. In addition to his great horse, we know that Orome had an affinity for hounds. Huan, the famed hound from the Beren and Luthien story, is originally given by Orome to Celegorm. This particular hound, who had been one of Orome's hunting dogs, was given special powers. He was immortal, tireless, sleepless, and the size of a small horse. Huan would go with Celegorm during the exile of the Noldor. Shortly before this, when Morgoth and Ungoliant destroyed the 2 trees, Orome is the first to attempt a pursuit. And the earth shook beneath the horses of the host of Orome, and the fire that was stricken from the hooves of Nahar was the first light that returned to Valinor. But so soon as any came up with the cloud of Ungoliant, the riders of the Valar were blinded and dismayed, and they were scattered, and went they knew not whither, and the sound of the Valaroma faltered and failed. But when the darkness had passed, it was too late. Melkor had gone whither he would, and his vengeance was achieved. Orome, being the rare Vala who traveled in Middle-earth in his physical form during the Elder Days, has great connections to the Free Peoples, even into the Third Age. The Northmen called him Bema, likely derived from the Old English word meaning trumpet, in honor of his great horn. These Northmen are the ancestors of the Rohirrim, and their famed horses, the Meras, are descended from Nahar himself. These would include Felaroth, the steed of Eorl the Young, first king of Rohan, and Freyalof's descendant, Shadowfax. It is also likely that Theoden's horse Snowmane was one of the Meras as well. Indeed, Theoden himself is compared to Orome during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, giving an indication of his greatness. Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like a new fire in his veins, and he was borne up on Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the Battle of the Valar when the world was young. In the east, near the Sea of Rhun, there is another beast believed to be descended from Oromes. These were the kine of Ara, a type of oxen hardier and wilder than any other in Middle-earth. The name Ara is the Sindarin form of Orome's name. According to Hammond and Scull's Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion, there is an unpublished manuscript at the Bodleian Library where Tolkien said the kine were similar to aurochs, an extinct cattle species nearly a foot taller than modern domestic cattle. In the middle of the Third Age, Vorondil, the steward of Gondor, would hunt the kine, and from one of their horns he makes the Great Horn, which would pass down his line to Boromir, son of Denethor. And just like the great Vala Orome, the descendants of Vorondil would wield this great horn in battle in the centuries to come. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Listen Me the Cinda, Celebrimbor, The Mighty Mim, Team Weasel, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Toby Mobs Music, CCDC Red Team, Nerd Sidgman Anytimer, Pelkey Sports Cards, Mookie the Brown, Christopher Carbaugh, Joe Tepper, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Michael Wu, Grant McGregor, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.